The rain hammered against the door like fists, desperate, pleading, drowning. Monique pressed her body against the wood, her 4-year-old son trembling in her soaked arms, his lips already turning blue. She could hear them inside, laughing, the television blaring over her screams. "Please." Her voice cracked, raw from begging. "Darnell, please, he can't breathe. He needs his medicine." Through the window, she saw her brother-in-law glance toward the door. Their eyes met for 1 second, just one, and then he turned his back, lifted his glass of cognac, and sat down. That was the moment she died inside. Before we continue, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment your country. I love knowing how far these stories travel. Monique Washington had learned early that family didn't always mean safety. She'd grown up in South Memphis, raised by a grandmother who worked 3 jobs to keep the lights on. Her parents were ghosts, her father long gone, her mother a casualty of choices Monique had sworn never to repeat. So when she met Terrence at 22, with his smooth smile and promises of something better, she believed him. She wanted to believe someone would finally choose her. They married young. Too young, people said. But Monique didn't care. She had a man who came home every night, a small apartment that was theirs, and eventually, a son. Elijah. Her miracle. Her reason for everything. Terrence's family was another story. His older brother Darnell was everything Terrence wasn't. Loud, flashy, successful. At least, that's what everyone thought. Darnell owned a construction company, drove a Mercedes, and had just finished building a house, so big it made people whisper. He threw parties where champagne flowed, and people took photos for Instagram, hashtagging #Black Excellence and #Building Empires. Monique had always felt small around him. "Your brother really made it," she'd told Terrence once, watching Darnell hold court at a family barbecue, his wife Crystal draped on his arm like an accessory. Terrence's jaw had tightened. "Yeah, he made it." She didn't understand the bitterness in his voice then. The cracks started small. Terrence worked construction too, but under Darnell. It was supposed to be a family business, but everyone knew who was really in charge. Darnell made decisions. Darnell signed the checks. Darnell took the credit. "He's my brother," Terrence would say when Monique questioned why he stayed. Family looks out for each other. But family, Monique learned, could also tear you apart. The real fracture came 6 months before that rainy night. Terrence had finally confronted Darnell about money. Thousands of dollars that had gone missing from shared accounts, contracts signed in Terrence's name without his knowledge, tax documents that didn't add up. Monique had helped him organize everything, spent nights at the kitchen table going through papers while Elijah slept. "He's stealing from you," she'd told Terrence. "From us." The confrontation happened at Darnell's house, that gleaming monument to success he never stopped bragging about. Monique hadn't been there, but Terrence came home different that night. Quieter. Defeated. What did he say? Terrence had stared at the wall. He said if I ever accused him of stealing again, I'd lose everything. The job. The family. Everything. "That's it? You're just going to let him? What do you want me to do, Monique?" His voice had cracked. "He's got lawyers. Connections. I've got bills and a wife and a son who needs me. You want me to fight a battle I can't win?" She'd wanted to scream that yes, some battles were worth fighting. But she'd looked at Elijah's shoes by the door, the ones with the soles wearing thin, and swallowed her anger. They stayed silent. And Darnell knew he'd won. That silence poisoned everything. Family gatherings became torture. Darnell would make comments, little digs that sounded like jokes but cut like knives. "Terrence, you still driving that old Civic? Man, I keep telling you to upgrade." Or, "Monique, you looking tired, girl. Motherhood wearing you down." Crystal, Darnell's wife, was worse in her own way. Everything was a competition Monique didn't know she was in. Designer bags. Vacations. Crystal's daughters in private school while Elijah went to the overcrowded public school down the street. "We're blessed," Crystal would say, her smile sharp. "Darnell works so hard for us." Monique learned to smile and nod, to shrink herself small enough to fit in spaces where she wasn't wanted. But Elijah was her joy. Her 4-year-old son with his gap-toothed smile and endless questions about everything. He loved dinosaurs and tried to roar like a T-Rex every morning. He called her Mama in that sweet, high voice that made her heart ache with love. "Mama, why does Uncle Darnell have a big house and we don't?" She'd knelt down to his level, touched his soft cheek. "Because we have something better. We have each other. And that's worth more than any house." She'd believed that. God, she'd believed that. The night it happened started ordinary. October rain, the kind that came down in sheets and turned streets into rivers. Elijah had been at her mother-in-law's house, a rare Saturday when Terrence had convinced Monique to let him stay overnight so they could have a date night. "We need this," he'd said. "Just us." She'd agreed, kissed Elijah's forehead 100 times, promised to pick him up first thing in the morning. They'd gone to dinner, laughed for the first time in months. Terrence had held her hand across the table and said, "I'm sorry. For everything. I'm going to fix this." She'd wanted to believe him. The call came at 11 p.m. Her mother-in-law's voice frantic. "Monique, Elijah's sick. He's wheezing bad. Real bad. I don't have his inhaler. You need to come now." Monique's heart had stopped. Elijah had asthma, severe enough that his inhaler was supposed to be with him always. She'd packed it in his overnight bag. She knew she had. "We're coming," she'd said, already running. The drive to her mother-in-law's house should have taken 15 minutes. In the rain, it took 30. Monique's hands shook on the steering wheel, Terrence calling ahead, telling his mother to start the car, meet them halfway if she had to. But when they arrived, her mother-in-law was standing in the doorway crying. "He's not here," she sobbed. "Darnell picked him up. Said Crystal wanted to see him, that it was on the way, that he'd bring him right back. But he's not answering his phone." Monique felt the world tilt. "What? I'm sorry, I didn't think." Monique was already in the car. Darnell's house was 20 minutes away, but she drove like the rain was chasing her. Terrence called Darnell 15 times. No answer. When they pulled up, every light in the house was on. Cars in the driveway. Music thumping through the walls. A party. Monique ran through the rain, her feet splashing through puddles. She could hear laughter inside. See shadows moving past the windows. She pounded on the door. "Darnell! Open the door!" Nothing. She pounded harder, her fists aching. "Darnell! I know you're in there. I need Elijah's inhaler." Through the window, she saw him. Sitting on his leather couch with a drink in his hand, Crystal beside him, friends crowded in the living room. He looked toward the door. Their eyes met. And he turned away. "Darnell, please." Her voice broke. "He can't breathe. Please." Terrence was beside her now, slamming his fists against the door. "Open the door. That's my son." Inside, someone laughed. Monique ran to the window, pressed her hands against the glass. "Crystal. Please. Where's Elijah?" Crystal glanced over, then leaned into Darnell, whispered something. They both laughed. That's when Monique heard it. A small, gasping sound from around the side of the house. Her heart stopped. She ran, Terrence behind her, and found the side door, the one that led to the garage. It was cracked open, and through it she could hear him. "Mama." Elijah was sitting on the cold concrete floor of the garage, his little chest heaving with each breath. His lips were blue, his eyes glassy. Monique grabbed him, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold him. "Baby, I'm here. Mama's here. Can't breathe." She tore through his bag, found the inhaler Darnell had never bothered to check for. Pressed it to his lips. Once. Twice. "Breathe, baby. Please breathe." But his lips were so blue. And the rain kept falling. They rushed him to the hospital, Monique holding him in the back seat, counting each rattling breath, begging God not to take him. The doctors tried. They tried for 47 minutes. Elijah died at 1:33 a.m. The official cause was asthma attack exacerbated by delayed treatment. Monique didn't cry at first. She sat in that hospital chair, staring at the wall, feeling something inside her crack and shatter into pieces so small she'd never put them back together. Terrence collapsed. Sobbed. Raged. But Monique was silent. Because she knew. If Darnell had opened the door, Elijah would be alive. If he'd answered the phone, Elijah would be alive. If he'd cared for 1 second about anyone other than himself, her son would still be breathing. The funeral was 4 days later. Darnell came. Wore a black suit. Cried real tears. "I'm so sorry," he told her, his voice breaking. "If I'd known." Monique stared at him. "You did know." "What?" "You heard me begging. You saw me through the window. And you turned away." His face shifted. Just for a second, she saw something cold flash in his eyes. "That's not fair, Monique. I didn't know it was that serious. You can't blame me for. Get away from my son's casket." The family tried to smooth it over. "She's grieving," they whispered. "She doesn't mean it." But Monique meant every word. She went to the police the next week. Sat across from a detective with tired eyes and told him everything. About Darnell ignoring her. About Elijah alone in the garage. About the party still going while her son died. The detective had listened, taken notes, then leaned back in his chair. "Ma'am, I understand you're hurting. But there's no evidence of a crime here. Your brother-in-law didn't force your son into that garage. He didn't lock the door. From what you're telling me, this was a tragic accident. He ignored me. He left a sick child in a garage during a party. That's not illegal. Immoral? Maybe, but not illegal. So he just gets away with it? The detective's face had softened with something like pity. I'm sorry for your loss. But unless you have evidence of intent or direct harm, there's nothing I can charge him with. Monique had walked out of that police station feeling something inside her go dark. The law wouldn't touch him. The family defended him. Even Terrence, broken and grieving, couldn't bring himself to fully turn on his brother. It's complicated, he kept saying. He's family. At night, alone in Elijah's room, Monique would sit in the dark and stare at his toys. His dinosaurs lined up on the shelf, his little shoes by the bed, and she'd hear Darnell's voice in her head. You can't blame me. But she could, and she did. 2 months after the funeral, Darnell posted on Instagram a picture of his house at sunset, golden light making it look like a palace. The caption read, "Built this empire with my own 2 hands. Blessed. Hashtag never give up, hashtag Black excellence." 63 comments. All praise. No one mentioned Elijah. No one remembered. Monique stared at that photo for an hour, and something inside her made a decision. If the world wouldn't give her justice, she'd take it herself. The first 3 months after Elijah's death, Monique was a ghost. She moved through the world like someone watching life through a screen, distant, numb, unreachable. Terrence tried to reach her. His mother tried. Even Crystal sent a text. "Thinking of you, red heart." Monique deleted it without reading. She stopped going to family gatherings. Stopped pretending. When Terrence asked her to come to Sunday dinner at Darnell's, she'd looked at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "You want me to sit at his table? He's my brother. We're all hurting. He killed our son." "Monique, don't." "He heard me begging, and he turned away. Our baby is dead because he didn't want to interrupt his party. And you want me to pass him the mashed potatoes?" Terrence had no answer. Their marriage fractured after that. Not loudly. Quietly. They slept in the same bed, but lived in different worlds. Terrence buried himself in work, trying to drown his grief. Monique buried herself in something else. Research. It started small. Lying awake at 3 a.m., she'd pull up Darnell's Instagram. Study the photos. The house. The cars. The lifestyle that seemed impossibly lavish for a small construction company. She started asking questions. How much did construction company owners really make? How much would a house like that cost? Where did the money come from? She created a fake LinkedIn profile, studied his business connections, read reviews of his company. And slowly cracks appeared. Complaints from clients about unfinished work. Rumors about cut corners. Whispers about contracts won through connections rather than merit. One review stuck with her. DW Construction took our deposit and disappeared for 6 months. Had to threaten legal action to get half our money back. Monique's heart had started beating faster. She went to the library, somewhere she couldn't be traced, and started digging deeper. Public records. Business filings. Property records. The house Darnell bragged about? Financed with a loan that should have been impossible for someone with his declared income. The company? Incorporated in a way that made it nearly impossible to track where money actually went. And Terrence's name was on half the documents. Forged signatures. Fake contracts. Tax evasion. Darnell hadn't just stolen from Terrence. He'd used his brother's identity to commit fraud. Monique printed everything. Built files. Created a timeline. And as she worked, something inside her came alive. She wasn't just grieving anymore. She was hunting. By month 4, Monique had transformed. Not in the way people expected. She didn't get a makeover or post revenge selfies. Her transformation was quieter. Sharper. She enrolled in a free online paralegal course. Started understanding law in a way the police hadn't bothered to explain to her. Learned about civil cases, evidence, liability, fraud. She got a job at a small law firm as a receptionist. Minimum wage answering phones, but she listened to everything. Learned how lawyers thought. How they built cases. How they destroyed people in court without ever raising their voices. At night she studied. Not just law, but Darnell. She befriended one of his former employees through Facebook. A man named Curtis who'd been fired and clearly had an axe to grind. They met for coffee. Man loved taking shortcuts, Curtis told her. Cut corners on every job. Used cheap materials, pocketed the difference. Half the inspections were passed because he knew somebody. And he kept 2 sets of books, one for the IRS, one for himself. Do you have proof? Curtis had smiled. I got photos of the fake invoices. Got texts where he told me to bill clients double what we paid for materials. I was keeping receipts in case he tried to throw me under the bus. Why didn't you go to the police? Because men like Darnell don't go down easy. They got lawyers, connections, family who'll swear they're saints. I didn't have the energy to fight that war. Monique had leaned forward. What if I do? Curtis studied her for a long moment. You're Terrence's wife. The one who lost her kid. Yes. Then he deserves whatever's coming. He gave her everything. Monique spent the next 2 months verifying it all. Cross-referencing dates. Finding other clients who'd been scammed. Building a case file that could bury Darnell. But she didn't go to the police. Not yet. Because she'd learned something important. The law moved slow, and sometimes it didn't move at all. Darnell had connections. A good lawyer could tie fraud charges up for years. She needed something bigger. Something that would destroy him faster than any courtroom. She needed fire. The idea came to her on Elijah's birthday. He would have been 5. Monique had spent the day alone at his grave, tracing his name on the headstone, whispering stories about the life he should have had. Mama's going to make this right, she'd promised. I swear. On the drive home, she'd passed Darnell's house. That monument to everything wrong in the world. Built with stolen money. Financed with fraud. Standing tall while her son was buried in the ground. And she thought, that house is a lie. By the time she got home, the plan was formed. Monique knew she couldn't just burn it down. That was too obvious, too crude, too easy to trace back. She needed it to look natural. An accident. Something that would destroy not just the house, but everything it represented. She needed Darnell to lose more than property. She needed him to lose his reputation. His status. His carefully crafted image. She needed the truth to burn alongside his empire. Over the next month, Monique became someone she didn't recognize. She befriended a woman named Shanice who worked at the fire marshal's office. They met at a grief support group. Shanice had lost her teenage daughter to gun violence. They bonded over loss, over anger, over the injustice of the world. Sometimes I want to burn it all down, Shanice had said one night. Yeah, Monique had replied softly. Sometimes I do too. They became close. Close enough that Shanice mentioned things she shouldn't. Electrical fires. Faulty wiring. How easy it was for old houses to go up if inspections weren't thorough. Insurance companies hate electrical fires, Shanice said. Hard to prove intent. Usually looks like an accident. Monique filed that information away. She also reconnected with an old friend from high school, DeAndre, who'd gotten into trouble young but straightened out. Now he worked construction. Knew how buildings were put together. And how they came apart. Hypothetically, Monique had asked him over drinks, if someone wanted to make a house unsafe, not collapse but have problems, how would they do it? DeAndre had given her a look. That's a weird question, Mo. It's for a story I'm writing. He hadn't believed her, but he'd answered anyway. Talked about load-bearing walls. Electrical systems. Gas lines. How cutting certain corners during construction could create time bombs that wouldn't go off for months or years. Darnell's houses probably already got problems, DeAndre had muttered. He was always cheap. Wouldn't surprise me if half that wiring wasn't up to code. Monique had smiled. Yeah, wouldn't surprise me either. The pieces came together slowly. Monique learned everything about Darnell's house. She drove by it at different times of day, noting patterns. Darnell and Crystal went out Friday nights. He bragged about it on Instagram, date nights, fancy restaurants, bottle service. The house would be empty. She studied electrical fires. Learned that old wiring plus hydro appliances could create sparks. Learned about accelerants that could look natural. Learned about timing. But most importantly, she prepared the evidence. She compiled everything Curtis had given her. Every invoice. Every text. Every photo. Added her own research. Built a case file so damning that even Darnell's lawyers couldn't save him. Then she sent copies, encrypted, anonymous, to 5 different people. A journalist who specialized in corruption, a state tax investigator, a civil rights attorney who'd helped her understand liability law, and 2 former clients of Darnell's company who'd threatened lawsuits. She scheduled the emails to send automatically in 1 week. Subject line: the truth about DW Construction. The emails would go out. The investigation would start. Darnell's empire would crumble. But Monique wanted him to feel what she felt. She wanted him to lose something he loved. The night she chose was cold and clear, late January, almost a year since Elijah died. Monique had learned patience. She'd planned every detail. Watched the house for weeks, memorizing routines. She knew when the neighbors walked their dogs, when the security cameras cycled, when Darnell and Crystal would leave for their Friday night out. She dressed in all black. Gloves. Hat pulled low. She looked like any other person walking through an upper-middle-class neighborhood on a winter night. The house was dark when she approached. Her heart pounded so hard she thought it might break through her chest. For a moment she almost turned around, almost drove away. But then she thought of Elijah. His blue lips. His gasping breaths. The way Darnell had turned away. She moved forward. The side door, the same one that led to the garage where her son had struggled to breathe, was locked, but Monique had learned to pick simple locks. It took her 3 minutes. Her hands shook the entire time. Inside, the house smelled like expensive candles and pride. Monique walked through the dark, her penlight guiding her. She found the electrical panel in the utility room. Using tools DeAndre had described, she created what would look like a wiring fault, a short that would spark, smolder, then ignite. She placed wadded newspaper near the dryer vent. Left the dryer running on high with a load of clothes inside. It would overheat. Eventually spark. The newspaper would catch. It wouldn't explode. It wouldn't kill anyone. But it would burn. And it would destroy. Before she left, Monique walked through the house one more time. Looked at the photos on the walls, Darnell and Crystal smiling like they owned the world. Looked at the furniture, the flat-screen TV, the kitchen with its marble countertops. All of it built on lies and theft. All of it standing while Elijah was gone. She walked into what looked like a home office. Found documents confirming everything she already knew. The fraud, the theft, the shortcuts. She photographed everything with her phone as backup. Then she set a single dinosaur toy on the desk. One of Elijah's. A T-Rex he'd loved. Let Darnell wonder. Let him know. She left through the side door, locked it behind her, and walked away. By the time she reached her car 3 blocks away, her whole body was shaking. She sat behind the wheel for 10 minutes, breathing hard, wondering if she'd made a mistake. Then she started the engine and drove home. The fire started at 11:47 p.m. Monique was in bed when her phone buzzed with the news alert. Fire trucks had been called to a house on Darnell's street. She opened Instagram and saw it, neighbors posting videos. Flames visible through windows. Smoke pouring into the night sky. She watched it burn. And felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. She felt relief. The fire made local news. Electrical fire destroys local businessman's home, the headline read. The article showed photos of the house. Half of it blackened and collapsed, the rest damaged beyond repair. The fire marshal had ruled it an electrical fault, likely caused by faulty wiring and an overheated dryer. No one was hurt. Darnell and Crystal had been out. But everything inside was destroyed. The photos on Instagram. The furniture. The clothes. The illusion. Gone. Monique watched Darnell's response play out in real time. He posted a video of himself standing in front of the charred remains, his voice breaking as he talked about loss and resilience and rebuilding. The comments flooded in, support, prayers, offers of help. We got you, bro. God's testing you. You'll come back stronger. Black excellence can't be burned down. Monique wanted to laugh. But 3 days later, everything changed. The emails she'd scheduled went out. The journalist published first. Construction company owner accused of fraud, tax evasion. The article laid out everything. The fake invoices. The forged signatures. The clients who'd been scammed. Curtis's testimony. Photos of the 2 sets of books. Then the tax investigator opened a formal inquiry. Then the civil rights attorney reached out to former clients about a class action lawsuit. Within a week, Darnell's entire world was collapsing. The police showed up at his temporary apartment. Took him in for questioning. Froze his bank accounts. Started investigating the fraud charges. His lawyer tried to spin it. Called it a witch hunt. A misunderstanding. But the evidence was too damning. Monique watched it unfold from a distance, her face carefully neutral. When people asked if she'd heard about Darnell's troubles, she'd say, "Yeah. Crazy, right?" When Terrence came home shaken, telling her that police had asked him about forged signatures, she'd held him and whispered, "Tell them the truth. You didn't do this." And she meant it. Terrence was a victim too. The family fractured completely. Some defended Darnell. Called the accusations lies. Said someone was setting him up. Others, the ones who'd always suspected something, started asking questions. Monique's mother-in-law called her, crying, "Did you know about this?" "About what?" "About Darnell. The fraud. The everything." Monique had paused. "I knew he was a liar. I just didn't know how much." There was silence on the line. Then, he's saying someone planted evidence. That someone's trying to destroy him. Who would do that? Another pause. Longer this time. Monique, did I what? Her voice had gone cold. Did I forge documents in Terrence's name? Did I steal from clients? Did I build a house with dirty money while bragging about how blessed I am? No, Ma. I didn't do any of that. Darnell did. But the fire? The fire marshal said it was faulty wiring. Sounds like Darnell should have hired better contractors. The line went dead. Monique set the phone down and felt something like peace. The truth came out slowly, then all at once. Clients came forward. Employees testified. The state tax board found evidence of evasion going back 5 years. Darnell's lawyer tried to negotiate, but there was too much. He was arrested 2 months after the fire. Charges: fraud, forgery, tax evasion, racketeering. Crystal filed for divorce a week later. Monique saw it on Facebook. Crystal Williams is no longer married to Darnell Williams. No explanation. No post. Just a quiet change in status. The comments were vicious. Gold digger jumping ship. Knew she was only there for the money. Guess black love ain't permanent after all. Monique didn't comment. Didn't gloat. But she saved the post. The trial was scheduled for 9 months out. Terrence was cleared of all charges. The investigation proved he'd been a victim. That his brother had used his identity without his knowledge or consent. He was devastated by the betrayal, but relieved not to be going to prison. Their marriage, though, didn't survive. Not because Monique didn't love him, but because every time she looked at him, she saw Elijah. Saw the family that had protected Darnell. Saw the silence that had killed her son. I can't do this anymore, she told him one night. They were sitting in their living room, the space between them feeling like miles. Terrence had looked at her with hollow eyes. I don't blame you. I don't hate you. I can't breathe here. Every day in this house, in this family, I'm suffocating. And I need to live. For Elijah. He'd nodded. Cried. I'm sorry. For all of it. I know. They divorced quietly. Split everything fairly. Terrence kept the apartment. Monique took her share and left Memphis. She moved to Atlanta. Started over. Got a job at a nonprofit that helped families navigate wrongful death cases. Used everything she'd learned to help other people find justice when the system failed them. She didn't tell anyone about Darnell. About the fire. About the evidence she'd uncovered and distributed. That was her secret. Her burden. Her justice. Some nights, she'd lie awake and wonder if she was a monster. She'd killed no one. Hurt no one. But she'd destroyed a man's life deliberately, methodically, without mercy. Was she any better than him? Then she'd remember Elijah's face. His blue lips. The way Darnell had turned away. And she knew the answer. The trial happened 10 months after the fire. Monique didn't attend. But she watched the news coverage. Read the articles. Darnell pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence. Got 8 years in federal prison. Ordered to pay back over $400,000 in restitution to the clients he'd scammed. His construction company dissolved. His reputation destroyed. His name became a cautionary tale. The house was never rebuilt. The lot sat empty, a charred reminder. Someone, Monique never found out who, planted a garden there. Flowers that bloomed every spring. A small stone that read, "For those who were forgotten." Monique visited once. Stood in front of that empty lot and felt something release in her chest. I kept my promise, she whispered to Elijah. I made it right. The wind rustled through the flowers. And Monique walked away. 2 years after the fire, Monique met someone. His name was Kenneth. He was a teacher, soft-spoken and kind. He asked her out for coffee, and she almost said no. But something in his eyes, something gentle and patient, made her say yes. On their 3rd date, he asked about her past. She told him about Elijah. About the loss. About the grief that still lived in her bones. She didn't tell him about the fire. About the evidence. About the revenge. Some truths were hers alone to carry. You must be incredibly strong, Kenneth said softly. I'm not. I'm just surviving. That's what strength is. They dated for a year before he asked her to marry him. Monique said yes. Not because she'd forgotten Elijah. Not because the grief had disappeared. But because she'd learned that survival wasn't the same as living, and she wanted to live again. On her wedding day, she wore a small pin shaped like a dinosaur. No one asked about it. No one needed to know. It was for her son. For the life he should have had. For the justice she'd claimed when the world offered none. 3 years after the fire, Monique got a letter. It was forwarded from her old address in Memphis. The handwriting was shaky, unfamiliar. She opened it carefully. Dear Monique, I know I'm probably the last person you ever wanted to hear from. I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect forgiveness. I just needed to say this before I couldn't anymore. I was wrong. About everything. I was selfish and cruel and blinded by pride. I heard you that night. I knew Elijah was sick. And I chose to ignore it because I didn't want to deal with it. Because I was more worried about my party, my image, my comfort than a child's life. I killed your son. Not with my hands, but with my indifference. And I will carry that for the rest of my life. The fire. The charges. Losing everything. I deserved it all. I know people think I'm the victim. But I'm not. You are. Terrence is. Elijah was. I don't know if you had anything to do with what happened to me. Part of me thinks you did. And if you did, I don't blame you. I'd have done worse in your place. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying I'm sorry. And I'm saying you were right. I hope you find peace. I hope you build a life that honors your son. I hope you forget I exist. Asterisk. I wish I could. Darnell. Monique read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, walked to her fireplace, and burned it. Watched the paper curl and blacken. Watched the words disappear into ash. She didn't feel satisfaction. Didn't feel vindication. She just felt tired. Kenneth found her there, staring at the flames. You okay? She leaned into him. Yeah, I am. And she meant it. 5 years after Elijah's death, Monique opened a foundation in his name. The Elijah Washington Foundation provided emergency assistance to families dealing with childhood asthma, free inhalers, emergency medical funds, education programs. She'd raised the money through grants, fundraisers, and one anonymous donation that covered half the startup costs. The donor's note had said only, "For the children we couldn't save." Monique suspected it was from Curtis, Darnell's former employee. But she never asked. The foundation helped 70 children in its first year. 120 in its second. Every child they helped was a life Elijah's death had meaning for. Every inhaler they provided was justice of a different kind. People called Monique inspiring. Strong. A survivor. She smiled and accepted the compliments. But alone at night, she'd sit in her home office and look at the photo of Elijah on her desk. His gap-toothed smile. His bright eyes. I miss you every day, she'd whisper. Every single day. The grief never left. But it changed shape, became something she could carry instead of something that crushed her. She'd learned to live with it, to build a life around the hole he'd left. And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, she'd think about the fire. About Darnell. About the evidence she'd sent and the empire she'd burned. She'd think about justice. About revenge. About the line between the two. And she'd wonder if what she'd done made her a monster. But then she'd think about Elijah, gasping for air in that garage while people laughed inside. She'd think about Darnell turning away. And she'd know the truth. She wasn't a monster. She was a mother who'd taken back what the world refused to give. Justice. On Elijah's 10th birthday, Monique visited his grave. She brought dinosaur toys, a whole set. Lined them up on his headstone. You'd be 10 today, baby. In 5th grade. Probably still asking a million questions and driving me crazy. The wind picked up, rustling the flowers she'd planted. I built something good from what happened. I helped people. I survived. And I made sure the man who hurt you lost everything. She paused, tears streaming down her face. I hope that's enough. I hope wherever you are, you know I fought for you. I hope you know you mattered. That you still matter. She pressed her hand to the cold stone. I love you. Forever. The sun broke through the clouds, warming her face. And Monique stood, wiped her tears, and walked back to the life she'd built from ashes. 7 years after the fire, Monique got a call. Darnell had been released early for good behavior. He'd served 5 years. Was out on parole. Her first instinct was fear. Then anger. But when she really sat with it, she felt nothing. He couldn't hurt her anymore. She'd taken everything from him that mattered, his reputation, his status, his carefully constructed empire. He was just a man now, broken and forgotten. And she was free. She never saw him again. Never sought him out. Never needed to. Her revenge was complete. Not because he was in prison. Not because he'd lost everything. But because she'd survived. She'd built something beautiful from her grief. She'd helped hundreds of children. She'd honored her son's memory. She'd won. Not the way courts win. Not the way the law wins. But the way mothers win. By turning pain into purpose, grief into action, loss into legacy. Elijah's life had mattered. And Darnell's house, that symbol of everything wrong in the world, had burned. Justice, Monique learned, didn't always wear a black robe and carry a gavel. Sometimes it wore a mother's face and carried a match. Was her revenge justified? Which character angered you the most? What would you have done? If this story moved you, please consider leaving a super thanks to support more stories like this. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload. And share this story with someone who needs to know that even in our darkest moments we can rise. Thank you for listening. Until next time.